But first, let's talk about what has been happening between Iran and America and the peace understanding that has now come to the fore. United States and Iran have achieved a major breakthrough to end the war, which has gripped West Asia for over 3 months now. Both sides have reached an agreement on a memorandum of understanding. Now, this MOU is not the final agreement, but what it does is it paves the path toward negotiations on the final deal. Now, representatives from America and Iran are scheduled to sign this MOU on the 19th of June in Geneva. Leading up to the formal adoption, both sides will continue pre-implementation of the discussions. Now, what does this MOU really entail? Remember, neither Iran nor the United States has provided the official text of the MOU that has been agreed upon. All we have for now are conflicting statements from officials from both sides and source-based reports. Announcing this critical development, Donald Trump said that the naval blockade on Iran will be lifted immediately and that the Strait of Hormuz will be open to all commercial vessels. But hours later, Donald Trump said that the U.S. naval blockade would be removed and the Strait of Hormuz would reopen after the planned signing of the deal on Friday. However, Iran's foreign ministry said that maritime service fee will be charged in Hormuz. Apart from this, Iran says that the U.S. has committed to compensations, releasing frozen funds under the deal. According to Iranian media, U.S. will be releasing $12 billion of Iran's frozen assets after signing of the MOU. However, remember, there's no official response yet from Washington on the existence of such a clause in the final deal. Now, this entire premise of the war with Iran was to degrade its military capability, create conditions for regime change, and force Iran to give up its ambition of acquiring a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump says all three objectives have been achieved and that he will have Iran sign a nuclear deal soon that is better than Obama's JCPOA. Let's quickly also tell you Obama's Iran nuclear deal, which was signed in 2015 and it remained in force until Trump pulled out of it in 2018. The deal ensured that Iran would not seek, develop or acquire nuclear weapons. Iran's nuclear enrichment was capped at 3.67% for 15 years. In return, the US and European nations lifted sanctions on Iran and they released its frozen funds. Under the Obama-era deal, Iran agreed not to seek a nuclear weapon. But Donald Trump argued that it was binding for only 15 years and that a new deal with Iran would not have such an expiry date. But to achieve this, Donald Trump will have to overcome a major roadblock, and that is Israel. Israel is not a signatory to this MOU. If the American president fails to convince Benjamin Netanyahu to withdraw Israeli forces from Lebanon, this entire deal with Iran could collapse. Tehran has made it clear. A peace deal with the US must ensure an Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon and the cessation of all strikes by Israel. During an interview with ABC, former US President Barack Obama raised doubts about the possibility of a better nuclear deal with Iran than the JCPOA.
It is doubtful that any agreement that arises is going to be significantly different or a significant improvement from the deal that we had in the first place and had worked for a long stretch of time before the United States pulled out of it. So I'm hopeful that bombing stops and ordinary people are no longer suffering as a consequence of the war.
Meanwhile, according to the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the main difference between Trump's deal and Obama's deal is that Obama begged Iran for a deal while the current administration bombed them. But will that end up being the only difference, or are there more? That's the big question. All right, joining me on Race to Power tonight is Giorgio Cafiero, professor at the Georgetown University and CEO of Gulf State Analytics. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Giorgio, good evening. Welcome to WION. Before I go to the similarities and differences between what Trump has been perhaps able to achieve and the JCPOA, I want to understand from you what you think of this latest understanding between Iran and America. Do you think it's going to sustain itself, considering the fact that the big elephant in the room is Israel, is Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back on your program. I think obviously there is reason to be grateful for the fact that the U.S. and Iran are set to sign the Islamabad MOU on Friday in Switzerland. It's important, but at the same time, I think there's good reason to be skeptical. We know that there's very, very little trust between the two sides. The fundamental issues that have been driving tension are unresolved. We also have seen in recent years that ceasefires don't necessarily mean too much in the Middle East. And to really get to your question, Israel has its own interests in sabotaging U.S.-Iran diplomacy. So I think for the Trump administration, it will be very important to put pressure on Israel to rein in Netanyahu in order to see to it that Tel Aviv does not play a spoiler role here. This is going to be critical to the success of diplomacy between the United States and Iran, making sure that Israel's aggression is reined in. If the Trump administration fails to put sufficient pressure on Israel, I have no doubt that the Israeli leadership will do whatever it takes to sabotage the diplomacy between the United States and Iran that countries such as Pakistan and Qatar have been working very hard to facilitate.
Right. Jojo, when we talk about what Donald Trump has said about this latest understanding between America and Iran and what Barack Obama achieved under JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, what do you think, which one holds a better deal? Which one has gotten more from America as far as extracting from Iran is concerned? Because the basic premise of both these deals has been, number one, that Iran doesn't, further enrich its nuclear stockpile and caps it, something that the JCPOA already had achieved 95%, I believe, a little over 95% as far as stockpile was concerned. And then the sanctions relief. Do you think that is something that will have a solid confirmation in this deal, will have an upper hand in this deal, which Donald Trump has been trying to get?
Yeah, so just to be clear, this recently announced MOU that's going to be signed in a couple of days is going to open up the space for the two sides to begin negotiating on the very difficult issues, including the nuclear file. We don't know quite yet what the terms will be on any new nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran that is to be negotiated in this upcoming period. In terms of what is going to be committed to by both Washington and Tehran on Friday, in the general public is not really aware of that. And so I think right now there's kind of this war of narratives in which Trump's supporters on the U.S. side are telling us certain things, and then the Iranian leadership on the other side is saying something else. And I think both sides are trying to spin the facts, which the general public just simply does not have right now. So it's a little difficult to comment on how, to what extent, if at all, Trump has been able to secure something for the United States that from an American standpoint is better than the 2015 JCPOA. I would say that while a new nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran might be a little bit different from the 2015 JCPOA, I have a very difficult time imagining that Iran would concede much more this time around than it did back in 2015. I think it's important to realize that Iran feels very emboldened right now. And let's remind your viewers that for many years, for many decades, Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. And so many people in the United States and other countries thought that Iran was bluffing and that that was a move that the Islamic Republic would not make. Well, this year, Iran did close the Strait of Hormuz, and they demonstrated that that secured a lot of leverage for the Iranians. And as a consequence, I repeat, Iran is feeling very emboldened right now, and I do not see Tehran really conceding much more this year than they did back in 2015 when Obama was in the White House and the JCPOA passed.
Yeah, which was what I was coming to next, Giorgio. And fair enough, you say that it's too early to compare what Trump has achieved under this understanding and the JCPOA because we don't have the finer details of what has been agreed upon. But as you said, doesn't Trump's America leave Iran more emboldened and at a stronger position than Barack Obama's America? You've got Iran militarily also giving a befitting reply to American forces. You've got Iran holding the Strait of Hormuz in its control. And now you've got, Iran also putting its foot down on its nuclear enrichment. So clearly Trump is leaving a stronger Iran behind.
I would say that I agree with that. When this war began in late February, the United States was expecting, or at least the Trump administration, I should say, was expecting a decisive victory in a matter of weeks. Look at the situation right now in the middle of June. I don't think anyone can expect a fall of the Islamic Republic anytime in the foreseeable future. If anything, I think what we now see is more hardline elements in Tehran at the helm. And clearly the fact that Lebanon was included in this MOU that was just announced goes to show that Iran is doing quite a bit to revive the axis of resistance that suffered severe blows back in 2024. And the fact that Iran retains much of its missile capabilities also speaks to the resilience of Iran as a powerful regional force. And therefore, I certainly agree with your point that this time around, in middle of 2026, Iran is feeling very emboldened, a totally different environment compared to 2015, when I think the United States really had an opportunity to move forward and start a new chapter with Iran and potentially rebuild some of the trust that had been degraded over the previous decades. It will be much harder right now to imagine the U.S. and Iran rebuilding some sort of trust. But I will say I am grateful, though, that at least the Trump administration has decided to take this off-ramp, and I do think this was the best option that the Trump administration had at this point.
All right, Giorgio, let's see how this moves forward and whether finally the world can see peace between the two sides. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Giorgio, for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Good to be with you. Thanks a lot.